Okay, so you're programming in Python, and you're primarily working, in a let's say an IPy notebook through, Jupyter or something like that, and your results are coming in line with your programming. So you write a block of code, and then you'll hit Control and Enter and run the code, and the results come out right there. That's all fine and good, but that's not really accessible to a large swath of the population. So a lot of biologists out there are not bioinformaticists, and they don't know about programming, and they don't really know about using Python and that method. So what we really need is we need uh, methods to create graphical user interfaces that have Python code running on the backside. So Python is not a programming language that it's easy to uh, make a graphical user interface. So we need to kind of mate Python with another language and use the other language to write the front end, what people see, and let Python run in the background, because Python does have a very rich set of libraries that can be used for performing bioinformatic analyses. So we don't want to discount Python. We don't want to have to go rewrite all of these different libraries. But we want to be able to create a graphical user interface, a program that most people can use. So this is a big challenge for Python programmers, and I'm going to show you at least a primer of how to do this using Visual Studio and, in this case, the Visual Basic.NET programming language. You could also use C#.NET or F#.NET. Any of the .NET programming languages would work with this. The syntax is just going to be different. So if you're familiar with C#, which I'm sure a lot of you are, you can convert these, the scripts that I'm going to show you, or the language that I'm going to show you in VB.NET, can be converted over to C#. So before I actually go through the code, I want to go ahead and show you the graphical user interface. And this is just a very simple one. I'm going to show you how to use both the Python engine that can be run from within the .NET language, as well as how to import in external scripts in the form of functions. So let's go ahead and start this program before we dive into the code. So what we have here is a graphical user interface that's going to perform some very simple calculations. Okay, on this side over here, in this one box, we have two calculations that will be performed by actually writing the Python code in Visual Basic.NET and using a Python interpreter in there to feed it to the Python engine. And then the second part over here, this is using an external Python script. So the external Python script will basically pull the functions out of it, perform the calculations, and then we'll shut the Python engine. So either one of these are just very simple calculations, but I'm going to show you two different ways of doing it. This is like base Python, just real simple calculations, the input times two. Whenever we bring pi in here, we're going to use pi as it's derived from NumPy. So NumPy is one of the libraries in Python, and I'm going to show you how to import that library, both using the Visual Basic interpreter for Python, as well as using the external script. So let's just show you how these works. I have all these set to 2, so we can change them to whatever number you want them to be. Let's change them to 3 and 5 for each one of them. And you can see that it takes a little bit of time to use it with the interpreter. Pulling the functions out of a script goes a little bit faster. So, but either way, this is Python being executed, not Visual Basic.NET. This is Python code right here that's performing these calculations. So let's look at how we do this. Let's go back to the code. And I'm just going to walk you through this code because what I like to do whenever I'm looking for examples of code on the net is I like to just look at their code and kind of read the comments. Sometimes there aren't enough comments to really know what's going on, but I like to read the comments. But before you do any of this, there's a couple of very important things that you have to do. Number one, do not try to use Visual Studio 2022. It won't work because it tries to use the wrong version of the .NET, and you should be able to set the version of .NET in there, but you can't set it back as far as you need to get the current version of PythonNet to work, which PythonNet is the library that's going to allow us, or the NuGet package in this case, that's going to allow us to interface Python with .NET. Okay, so install and use Visual Studio 2019. Okay, and the other thing is you're going to have to check and make sure now whenever 2019 first creates a new project. In this case, this is a window forms project in VB.NET. But when it creates the project, it's going to start it out with a target framework of .NET 4.7.2. If it is not 4.7.2, this will not work. So you have to make sure that that is 4.7.2, and you do that by right-clicking on the project over here and going to properties. It'll pop up these properties, and you can check the .NET framework. Okay, and so make sure that that's set. Okay, the other thing is that you have to have a separate installation of Python, and it needs to be Python 3.1.2. You need to install it separately because most of you are going to be using Anaconda and Jupyter notebooks, and you will have installed all that at the same time. If you try to use the Python library that's installed when you do that, it will not work. So install Python as a standalone installation. Install Python 3.1.2, and that's what you'll need. Okay, so once you have the Windows Forms project started, you're going to need to do a few things to get set up. You're going to go to Tools. Now, I already have all this set up, but I'm going to show you how to do it. You're going to go Tools, and you're going to go to the NuGet Package Manager, and then you're going to go to Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. Okay, and it's going to pop up, and you're going to search for PythonNet. PythonNet. Okay, and the PythonNet, it's 3.0.3 is the one that you want to install. So I already have it installed in this project. I don't need to install it again, but you'll need to click on it and click Install over here. Okay. Now then, you're going to need a Python script. And you're going to make it in a separate, you can make it through Visual Studio if you want, but you can also make it through a Jupyter notebook. But in any case, you're going to need this Python script. So, or any Python script that you want to use. So create you a Python script separately. And then you're going to take that script and you're going to add it to your solution over here. So what you're going to do is you're going to right click in the blank area down here, and you're going to go to add, and you're going to go to existing item, and you're going to find that Python script wherever you have saved it on your system, and you're going to add it to this solution here. Now, in theory, you should be able to access a Python script that is not in the solution. That does not work for some reason or another. But honestly, why would you want it to work? You're building a standalone application here that's going to be installed at one time. So if you're going to use the script, you want it to be in the solution so that it gets packaged with the solution, and so that when you install the solution on whatever computer you install it on, it's still accessible from there. It wouldn't make sense to have it somewhere else on your machine and access it there. So anyway, this is just the real simple Python script, and all it does is basically multiplies 5 times whatever the input is times 2. And the second function on here multiplies 2 times pi times whatever the input is. And that's not times 2, excuse me. That's what we're rounding it to, is to 2 decimal places. So it's going to spit us back a number that has 2 decimal places on it. So the first is 5 times the input. The second one is 2 times pi times the input. So that's the script that we're using. So let's go back to our code. So now that we have the Python script in here, we've made sure we're using the right version of .NET, and we have the right version of Python installed. Now we can come back here to our code, and I've kind of written a bunch of this stuff in as comments in the code, and it kind of tells you, yeah, you'll need version 3.03 of PythonNet. You'll need Python 3.12, not using Anaconda. You want it to be, and I misspelled Anaconda there. It's Anaconda, not Anacondo. But you'll want it to be its own separate installation. And the reason is you're going to use the Python net runtime is going to need access to that dynamic link library. So let's just start up here at the top of the form. We got imports python.runtime, import system.diagnostics, and that's just basically something that's needed for the form. But the python.runtime is actually the Python net. So that initializes the Python net NuGet package so that we can use it. Now then, whenever you want to start programming, I don't know how familiar you are with Visual Studio and VB.NET or any of the .NET languages, but basically it's very, very simple. You have a toolbox over here, and you can drag onto this form whatever controls you want. So if I drag this control 3 on here, and I want to have something happen in a text box, so I bring another text box in here. If I want to have something happen in that text box whenever I click button 3, I see that this text box is text box 9. So let's double click button 3. It'll bring up the code that makes that do something. And let's just say text box 9.text equals, let's just do the hello world. Okay, so now let's start the program, and we should see the new text box as well as the new button. Give it just a second to fire up. It's building the solution right now, so it's basically building a shadow solution. Okay, so now when we click button 3, it should come up and say hello world there. And there it is. So it's that simple. You have a button on there, and you go back to the code that makes something happen when you click that button. So what we're going to do is we're going to use that same logic to allow Python to pass some variables back to us. So let's go to this first part here that actually uses Python in VB.NET rather than using an outside script. And let's see what we do. So we imported python.runtime. We're now in the part of the code that occurs whenever button 1 is clicked, and it handles the button 1 click. So that just tells you that this is what happens whenever button 1 is clicked. Now we got to tell Python net, the Python runtime, we got to tell it where to find the Python dynamic link library. So wherever that is on your system, just go ahead and tell it where it is. Okay, this can be an outside file. It does not have to be within the solution. I would suggest to put it in the solution before you're said and done, but in my case, I left it where it's actually installed on my system. Okay, so now the Python runtime knows where to find the dynamic link libraries that form Python. Okay, Now we got to initialize the Python engine. So we're saying, okay, get ready, Python. We're fixing to feed you some stuff, and we're going to want you to spit it back to us. So that's why we need the Python engine running. Now we need some variables. In this case, we have two output variables, two input variables, and we have one variable here that NP, which if you're familiar with Python, is often used as to represent NumPy. So we'll be using that as the same way you use it in Python. And now we're going to have to set a block of code here using a using statement that initializes the Python. This is global interpreter lock is what it stands for. So basically it's just saying, hey, we're going to lock Python into performing one thread at a time. And this is the thread that we want it to perform. So now then, we're just going to do a really easy calculation here. For output 1, which is our first output up there, first output variable, we're just going to do 2 times whatever the input 1 is. Now, input 1, we've already initialized up here as being entered in text box 1. And then input 2 is going to come in at text box 2. So input 1 is just a super simple calculation, 2 times input 1. Now then, for the processing of input 2, we're going to do a little bit more of a advanced calculation because we're going to use pi as it's defined in NumPy. So we got to first import NumPy. So we're going to use the pi.import function, and we're going to bring in NumPy, and we're going to assign it to the MP variable. And then we're going to use that MP variable as a string in this case, and we're going to multiply it times input number 2, which the user will have inputted. And then we're going to close this thread by using the end using statement. So that's how we do it, actually coding Python into our VB.NET. And then we're going to send the output from output 1, which is right here, the 2 times the input. We're going to send it to text box 3 as text. And then we're also going to send the output from the second calculation, but we're going to round it in this case. We're going to use math.round. And we're going to round it to 2 decimal places. So here we're using a .NET function to round the number to put it into the text box. Now then, a very important thing here, because if you try to start a new, in other words, you try to click the button again, you're going to get an error because the Python engine is still running. It's still locked in as before. Not the GIL. That's not what I'm talking about when I say it's locked in. But the engine is still running, and we need to shut it down so it can be reinitialized whenever we click the button again. So you're going to do Python engine.shutdown, and that's going to shut it down. And now you can click the button as many times as you want to, change the input as many times as you want to. So that's how you do it whenever you actually code Python into VB.NET. Now then, now we want to use button 2 in order to use a external script which has functions in it and do our calculations that way. So we're going to have 2 variables that hold the results. We're going to call them first result and second result. We're going to initialize the Python DLL and the Python engine just as before. We're going to take the input from 2 text boxes. So it's going to be string input 1, string input 2. Now we're going to do a couple of conversions on this, kind of massaging, if you will, of the input data to get it to where Python can accept it. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take these string inputs here, and we're going to convert them to a decimal. So the string input 1 and string input 2, we're going to use the .NET function, convert.toDecimal, and we're going to convert those to decimals. So input 1 and input 2 will now be floating point decimals as input. So what we need for Python, though, is we need a PyFloat. So we need floating point decimals in the format that Python wants them, which is PyFloat. So we're going to do dim PyString 1 and 2, and we're going to use those as new PyFloat. And the PyFloat is a function that comes in from the PythonNet library. So we're going to use PyFloat, and then we're going to lock in the GIL again. And then we're going to come down here and we're going to name a new variable, PyScript, and we're going to use PyModule.import, and we're going to import the script that we want to use. So this is just telling us what script to import, and it's going to look right here to find it. So right here within our solution is where it's going to look to find it, and that brings it in. I don't really need this here. This was an old way I was trying to do it. So forget about that I just deleted, but this is the way you bring in the script, the Python script. Now then, the first result is invoking that script, so calling that script and then calling the first function in that script, which is called myfunction1, and feeding it pystring1. So it's going to feed it that floating point number as input, and it's going to perform myfunction1, and it's going to spit us back a result, and we're going to call that result first result. And the same thing with second result. We're going to invoke the method, so we're going to call the PyScript, which is the function over here, or the script over there, and we're going to open or just use the myfunction2. We're going to feed it pystring2. We're going to perform the calculations, and we're going to get the result as second result. And then we're going to take first result and second result. We're going to convert them to strings, feed them back out to text box 7 and 8, and then we're going to shut down the engine again. And it's as simple as that. So there you have it. Two different ways to use Python, using PythonNet to write a graphical user interface for pretty much any Python script that you have. The one thing I will say is the most quirky thing about using PythonNet is converting back and forth between the different formats that Python uses for certain structures and the structures that are used in .NET. As you saw here, we had to do some kind of funky conversions here to get it in the form that we wanted. They're called codecs. There's some codecs that are basically conversion scripts in PythonNet that allow you to make some more complicated conversions. And I'm going to do a video about those later. I'm not going to include it in this here because this here you really just need to learn how to get the two languages to talk to each other and give you some useful input. So watch for that on a future video. So I hope this helps you out. I hope it gets you a little further down the line. Again, this will start the GUI up, and we'll look at it and run it one more time. This just allows you to use Python in .NET to perform some calculations. Just like that. Oh yeah, and hello world. So I hope this helps you out. I hope it gets you a little further down the line. If it did, please click subscribe and please like this video. I'm sorry that this one was a little longer than most of my videos. I try to keep them all pretty short, but this is a little more complex subject. So I hope that you don't mind that. If you would, if you have comments, please leave them in the comment section. And have a great day.